What's up, you guys? It's your man, the myth, the legend, based off Rafondo, and I'm here to talk about today the times. Basically, like the changes from the 50s and to now, 2022. But basically, I wanted to go a couple of years forward. I mean, backwards, yeah, and talk about the Black Wall Street era because and it show you how black people actually had common sense back then and how you shouldn't just because of the way we act today, you shouldn't just jump up and think that we all act like that. Because back then, in those times, we actually thought about the things we did before we did them. You know, now today it just shoot first and ask questions last. But back then, that's not how it was. Even back then, like the sagging thing, niggas fell backwards sagging is pretty much the that's something that happened started after way after that when jails and prisons were introduced to the community and stuff. Like back then in like for example like in Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Arkansas, they basically didn't wear their pants low. They never did that. Those boys. That's just a little small detail to tell you how we were thinking back then. Like we dressed with belts and stuff, and we had on economic power. We had banks, and them conditions were way harder than what they are today. But to look at it, like it's kind of reversed. But I'll get to that later. Like right now I'm gonna speed it up. Go to 19. Like I'm gonna tell you the things that went and they came. You know what I'm saying during the times. Like for example, like in the 40s, people were more closer, more tighter. I mean, the racism was really up. Then people could do what they want. There was really no law to protect us. But people were free to people were more about their family, people were more close knit, people would actually go next door and check on their neighbor and actually lend them anything they need, and it would be vice versa, you know what I'm saying? And then come after the 1950s, where after that, that's pretty much when doo-wop was invented. If anyone doesn't know what doo-wop is, it's like the Temptations, the Five Heartbeats, yeah, all those people with the clunk or the crunk haircut, whatever they had, little Elvis haircut, they be relaxing and perming. Like back then, like in as you can see today, you'll never see that type of music again because back then, actually in the 50s and into the 60s, pretty much, there was a lot of love back then. You know what I'm saying? These are times where you wouldn't, you would probably still come home and see baby mama or girlfriend cheating on you, having a different guy over and stuff. But most likely you wouldn't because when people were actually in love, they actually gave a damn. But we were still living under conditions where we weren't making enough money and stuff, and only the celebrities are the only ones that can live that in that black Hollywood up there in Windsor Hills and all that, wherever that's at in LA. But yeah, I like the '60s and stuff. So back then we had love, and it was defined by music and stuff. Saying now as the '60s went and the '70s came, this is when things became more retro. This is when, like, even the times we're living in, this is when all that shit started. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't all about afros and people having their little Brady Bunch haircuts and stuff. It was about like people were still kind of about their family a little bit back then. But like as the '70s rolled on by, you could kind of look at doo wop like that was just R.I.P. You know what I'm saying? Because kind of like that's kind of when the love went. That's kind of when everybody wasn't really in love no more. Everybody's having kids with different people. Everybody's cheating on everybody. Because these are the more cooler times. In the '70s, this is when everybody wanted to be hip. Everything was jive and stuff. So it was like, so doo wop went by the '70s. Now we got disco, saying something that didn't even last through the '70s. But people are still a little bit family oriented. Saying like this ain't the point where family was cut off. '70s was the point where love was cut off. Saying, and then like on rolled the '80s, and then when the '80s rolled in, what we had paid in full. Saying, and that's a good definition because when the '80s rolled by, that's when family pretty much went. Saying that's why it was okay to cut Sonny's finger off, on his uncle to cut his finger off and put it in the envelope because when the '80s came by, love went. You know what I'm saying? Like moral when the '60s came, love went, right? And then when the 70s came, the morals and the standards of having, being righteous and staying away from drugs, because that's when drugs rolled in the 70s. And then when the 80s came, that's when family kind of came to an end. You know what I'm saying? And that movie Paid in Full pretty much defines that. You know what I'm saying? And then when the 90s rolled by, I was born in March 17, 1990. That's when everybody, you remember back then when, like, in the 70s, everybody was selling, it was kind of safe. You didn't have to really worry about nobody trying to rob the plug. You didn't have to worry about getting shot. Now, at these times in the 90s, people would say, oh, what came in the 90s? Guns and drugs and robbing people. Well, drugs came in the 80s, but drugs and robbing people came after that. Like, there was no loyalty after the 90s. After the 80s, there was no loyalty to your family. And then when the 90s came around, there was no loyalty to the plug. There was no loyalty to nobody. You know what I'm saying? And then now, 10 years later, we're living in these times. You know what I'm saying? Where, you can walk in, everybody got a phone, everybody got a camera, everybody got some type of social media of some type, right? And what I've been seeing usually on YouTube is people really cheating heavy on people. People not giving a damn no more. You know what I'm saying? Like these girls today don't really have no morals. Like, which takes me back to the 60s, and like I want to show you guys the difference. You see how we don't have doo wop, we don't have R&B no more, because there is really no more love in this world. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is just like a world, just like everybody just living for the moment. No one's really living forever. Nobody not buying land. Nobody not asking nothing. Nobody not really gonna inherit nothing. Nobody not really gonna will nothing to nobody. The way it's looking, you know what I'm saying? And everything's going skyrocket high. Gas used to be 99 cents when I was growing up, a gallon. Now that shit is just like $3 or $4 or $5. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know the difference between the times, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and the 90s, and a little bit before that. You know what I'm saying? That led up to what the destruction we're witnessing now. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day. It's Base Up Profondo. Peace.